Our Oscar-winning series continues into the 2010s with the 2014 Best Picture winner, Birdman. We open up the show this week by talking about the film's unexpected connection to the last Best Picture winner we discussed, No Country for Old Men. We dive into the blurred lines between what's real and what's imagined. We talk about the difference between love and admiration. And we wax poetics on the meaning of the title, The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. A thing is a thing, not what is said of that thing. Well, in this case, the thing is a podcast, and the podcast is pretty much a podcast. That's this week on Hell of a Picture. Welcome to Hell of a Picture, a movie podcast where we discuss an unforgettable film, and if it truly is a hell of a picture. My name is Andrew Bartlett. I'm sitting across the internet, as I do each and every episode, from the Regan Thompson to my Birdman, Mr. David Hollingsworth.
So we are one and the same then. We are.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you got
two
that.
sides of the same coin. Yeah, no, it's good. Very appropriate. Very appropriate.
Yeah. I could have gone, I don't know, one of the other actors, but actually Jake might have been kind of appropriate, the Zach Galifianakis character. But yeah, I feel like the same character, some different opinions. It works. We're doing Birdman today, and we're finishing up our Oscar run. That's right. We've done I don't know how many Oscar movies, like 8 or something, 7 or 8. And
yeah, it's been a few.
Yeah, it's all comes to a head with Birdman, which won Best Picture in 2014. So just over 10 years old now. And very excited to talk about this film. You have never seen this movie, correct?
I had not. I knew almost nothing about it. Almost nothing. Wow. I knew that there was a superhero component, but that was it. So very interesting watch experience to come in totally blank on this one. Yeah.
This is exciting. Okay, cool. Well, let's not delay any further, and let's get right into our deep dive into Birdman.
So, Regan Thompson is a one-time movie star whose fame derives from his role as Birdman, a superhero with a successful movie franchise in the 1990s. But celebrity is fickle, and after refusing to reprise his role for a 4th installment, Thompson fell out of favor in Hollywood. Now, years later, his career, self-esteem, and perhaps his sanity hinge on the success of an imperiled Broadway adaptation of the Raymond Carver short story, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. Regan must contend with deepening financial and family woes as the production and its cast spiral in parallel with the onstage narrative and its characters, dissecting the notions of love, fame, honesty, and art. All of that, and Regan may actually have superpowers? We're not quite sure. It's kind of vague. Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, as it is subtitled, was released in 2014. It was directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu, who also co-wrote the screenplay with 3 others. It stars Michael Keaton as Regan Thompson / Birdman, Emma Stone as his daughter Sam, Ed Norton and Naomi Watts as his co-stars Mike and Leslie respectively, and Zach Galifianakis as his best friend and lawyer / fixer, Jake. So, at the 2015 Oscars, Birdman would receive 9 nominations and come away with 4 wins, those being cinematography, direction, screenplay, and picture. In a film so centered on performance, it seems unfitting that none of its stars would win for theirs. Keaton, Stone, and Norton would all miss out on their bids for actor, supporting actress, and supporting actor. Disappointing as that is, I find it tremendously gratifying that this film won for cinematography. This is a small film that is about a play and could very easily have been a play, and it has none of the grand vistas or wide shots we tend to associate with achievement in cinematography. This movie is replete with what appear to be single-shot, handheld sequences that move through the warrens of a cramped theater space and never go any higher than the catwalk. This pleasantly surprising victory would once again come at the expense of our boy, Roger Deakins, who we discussed last week and who was nominated in 2015 for his work on Unbroken. a film that boasts a 52% score on Rotten Tomatoes. No fault of Rogers, I'm sure. This would mark Deacon's 12th nomination and 12th disappointment in the category. And he would be denied again the following year for his work in Sicario, making it a cool 13. But mercifully, 2 years later, the streak would end when Deakins finally won for Blade Runner 2049, a film which we have covered. Go back and listen if you have not. And his second victory would come a mere 2 years later for his work on 1917. And since I just spent 30 seconds talking about a guy who has nothing to do with our film this week, that must be your rundown.
Yeah, well said. I mean, we got to, anytime we can shout out Roger Deakins, I think we dive in, right?
We're contractually obligated at this point.
We love him.
Yeah, that's right. We have a blood pact that we must bring him up every episode.
Absolutely. We lot to dissect with this film, and yeah, let's just get right into it. It's last week the film we did in the 2000s Best Picture was No Country, and this, oddly enough, there's like connections between these two, even though they seem to be like vastly different films.
Yeah, we love a through line here on Hell of a Picture. I think it's fair to say. So it was a nice surprise for me to see that there is this continuation from our discussion last week on No Country. Michael Keaton's character, Riggin, albeit in very different circumstances, is not unlike Tommy Lee Jones's character in that they are both men who feel like the world is leaving them behind. Yeah,
it's that's where the comparison I thought of too, and I didn't even think of it until I was thinking back and we were sort of discussing our notes on the film, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. No Country do have similar characters. Both are struggling with getting older, and it seems that with Sheriff Bell, though, there's almost a melancholy to it. There's this melancholic acceptance to getting older. He's not really fighting it. He's just sort of like almost sad about it, the world passing him by. Whereas Regan, he can't accept it, and he can't accept his place in the world and what he's become. And he's constantly, the whole film is about him constantly fighting back against it until that very, very end of the film.
Yeah, he's sort of wrangling with the three temporal ghosts, an inescapable past, an incomprehensible present, and a terrifying future. Right. He cannot get away from Birdman. The voice of it quite literally haunts him, and that is how the public sees him. And the present is totally alien to him. He has zero literacy when it comes to modern media or relating to his daughter, right. Sort of another artifact of the present or a manifestation of the present. And when he gets locked out of the theater and he has to run around the front in his underwear, a tremendous scene. The world sees, it sees it within seconds because it's posted everywhere. And Sam, his daughter, right, basically has to explain social media to him with that great line, "Believe it or not, this is power." I love that line so much because I still find myself a little shocked by the heft of modern media sometimes.
The theory temporal ghosts is such a strong concept that you bring up. And what I find so compelling in this film is there's this idea of an inescapable past, and that a past that he seemingly never really wanted. But the fame and the fortune, he seems to hate that's what he was and that's what he's become. He's embarrassed by it, but also like he kind of longs for it,
Yes, definitely.
It's like, it's such a double-edged sword in that regard. And that, as you say, it leans into the incomprehensible present. And he only really knows what it was like to be like the biggest star in the world. And that has totally passed him by to a place where he's just trying through every morsel of his being to be relevant again, but this time in a different light. And the confusing part is whether he truly wants that pursuit, like an artist's pursuit, like in the production of the play, or if he just misses being relevant. Like that's sort of this dynamic that we're struggling with.
Yeah, totally. And there's another little fun through line here, and this one sort of goes back a lot further to our series on films that play with our sense of reality. This would have been an interesting inclusion in that series. More subtle than the ones we talked about, but still very appropriate. This movie makes you question a lot of what you're seeing, and it does it in a few clever and different ways. Most interestingly, I think, and part of this speaks to the brilliance of the cinematography, is how seamless a lot of the transitions are between scenes. It happens frequently
Right.
throughout that we'll go from from scene to scene with this wandering camera effect, and we don't know if what we're seeing is immediately following what we just saw, or if time has elapsed, if it's a rehearsal, if it's a live performance, if the people in it are acting, or if they're just acting out. In the case of Mike, you're always kind of looking through blurred lines, and that's not a failure in narrative. I think it's a very pointed technique, and it's used to make us question these things.
Yeah, it's brilliantly done. It plays perfectly into the theater setting of the film,
Yes, it does. Yes.
as well, and sort of this mental struggle our protagonist is going through. I When I first saw this in theaters, and I remember not really being able to understand. I don't think really get if Regan, what he's experiencing, is reality, or if it's like his reality. Do you understand what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Like what he's seeing, it's like this is actually what he like. Obviously, these other characters aren't seeing Birdman, right? I think that seems pretty evident. But you know, I think he does question if what he is experiencing is really what it is, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
There's, in turn, this makes us question what we're seeing as the audience and experiencing. And that's all through this, like, voyeur lens that messes with our sense of reality, right? And I think that definitely is supported by, as you mentioned, this kind of single shot camera technique that's used throughout the film.
Yeah, and the lines continue to be blurred as well because the actors' lives off stage sort of blend with their on stage personas, and we
Right.
start to realize we can't always trust what they say off stage or on. The character of Laura,
Mm.
Regan's much younger girlfriend, who's also in the production, she tells him she's pregnant, which eventually we learn she isn't. Regan lies to Mike about his father. He eventually turns a real gun on himself on the stage. The play, what we talk about when we talk about love, could just as easily be the title of this movie. It's a very meta experience that doesn't become insufferable in its meta-ness, which it very easily can. If the movie was longer, I think it could. I think they get out just in time, though.
Right, man. I just want to be clear, when you're talking about meta, you're not talking about Facebook, right? You're talking about just want to be clear on that.
No, they did pay me to use that word though.
Yeah, that's right. And but when we're talking about the meta aspect of the film, you need to look no further than the casting of the film and having Michael Keaton as the lead role. Like,
Exactly.
in a sense, he's more or less he's playing himself when he's playing Regan.
Yeah, aspects of himself,
And
sure.
yeah, sure. I think he's probably more critically respected than this character of Regan is, this actor Regan is. But he was the biggest superhero, Batman, during the 80s and 90s. He's arguably the biggest, or one of the biggest stars in Hollywood.
Hmm.
And while he's still a big star today, you could argue that he hasn't really found the heights of fame that he did when he played Batman, understandably. But a film like this sort of acknowledges that and recognizes that, in Keaton's case anyway, he's more than simply just playing this character. Like, aspects of him are this character, which, like you said, it's this meta idea. And then he's playing Regan, but Regan is also playing this other character in this play. There's levels to it.
Yeah, for sure. And that brings me to another idea, and it's this the word honesty comes up a lot, particularly when referring
Right.
to performance in this. Like Ed Norton's character Mike even says that the stage is the only place he is honest.
Right.
We see him play Truth or Dare with Sam, and he chooses truth every time. Another interesting thing. And he uses real gin on stage, and he gets genuinely drunk during one of the preview performances. So there's this fascination the characters in the movie have with honesty in acting. And Reagan even has that note from Raymond Carver, the person who wrote the short story on which the play is based, that he got from him years earlier in a production that he was doing. It says, "Thanks for an honest performance." It's so interesting to me that honesty should be the ultimate goal of something that you might say is inherently dishonest. Like to act, to be something other than yourself could be framed in that way. But like, do you think honesty is the goal of acting, or is it exactly the opposite?
Oh man, dude, that's a heavy question.
Yeah.
Because some would argue that it's the most honest a person can be, like Mike in this film, and others say it's just an illusion. And
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of the brilliance of it. There's a great story of I believe it. I'm gonna butcher this, but I think it was Dustin Hoffman, and maybe he was doing a film with. Oh gosh, I can't remember. It was two kind of older act. Maybe it was Gene Hackman, and yeah, like there was a scene where he had to like Dustin Hoffman had to stay up for like he had to be like run down and disheveled and tired and like whatever all this like so he like stayed up for like 3 days straight and then like showed up and was like in shambles to like shoot this scene. And I think it was Gene Hackman. He was like why you look so like disheveled and like tired. He's like, well, I stayed up for 3 days. I wanted to like make sure that this was like felt real or whatever. He's like, why don't you just act? Like, why, like, what are you doing? Like, you're
Yeah.
torturing yourself. Just pretend. You know what I mean? It's this
Yeah. Yeah.
illusion. But some actors need to do that, and that's like that's why I love the Norton character in this film, because I think he's my favorite character because he's such a pretentious asshole,
Yeah.
but one that is clearly on top of his game when it comes to acting. And but as you said, like sort of pulling the curtain back on how he can achieve this brilliance. It's like he needs authenticity to certain moments to make it real. I'd add even wanting, like, you mentioned the truth or dare and the booze and the actual booze, and he wants the actual gun, and he like actually wants to have sex on stage with his girlfriend, who's the other actress,
Mm-hmm.
Naomi Watts. And it's only those moments where he actually feels alive, which is so ironic as it's the moment that is the most fake. It's the most stage. It's and that's the sort of opposite of how we see Regan. And he seems to fake, and he like, I don't know about you, but like when he's on the stage, it's like it's so over the top and it's so bad. And it's like even down to that weird wig he wears. It's just like, oh man, this is like these are
Yeah.
terrible. This just looks weird. And it's why the critic already knows, even before she sees it. She says, he wants. She already knows what she's gonna bash him, right? And it's gonna be terrible. He can't be real on stage because he doesn't know how to be real in his real life. And he thinks he wants fame and fortune and success, but he doesn't really know. He feels stuck in that persona of Birdman, I guess, from years ago. And he's just constantly fighting that throughout the film.
Yeah. I'm so big question. Does he actually have superpowers? I mean, like, there are
Yeah.
there are hints suggesting both yes and no throughout. Which forces us to question whatever conclusion we come up with. The final word seems to be most easily interpreted as yes, like because when Sam looks out the window, in the hospital, first she looks down and then she looks up, and when she looks up, there's this light and she smiles. And to me, that suggests that he actually flew, but there's more throughout that says no. And I think what I take from it is another comment on honesty. He spends most of the movie hiding something about himself, something unique and special that could be so great, but he only treats
Right.
it as destructive and internalizes it until the end, when he takes the bandages off his face, bandages which look a lot like the Birdman mask, not by accident, I'm sure. And he becomes unburdened, and then he can actually fly.
I think that's something a lot of actors struggle with in general, whether the decisions they're making are the right ones, whatever that means, I think you're right with the idea of accepting who he is at the end. And in that acceptance, he kind of gets forgiveness from his daughter, I think. And that's sort of what I think what she's looking at. Like maybe it's like at the end, the perspective changes. We're with him. We're seeing his perspective the whole film. And then at the end, it's with his acceptance. It kind of shifts over to her point of view. and she's accepting him now that he's kind of done all this. You know, and even from his ex-wife too, it's like saying, yeah, fuck, I was Birdman, that defined me, but it's not the only thing that defines me, you know, and you can move on from that and you can have highs and lows, but you know, that's sort of that, like you said, the acceptance of it is what's paramount.
Yeah, and you know, you talked about him not sort of, you know, he seems to be wrestling with what he wants in a lot of ways. You know, is it fame that he's after? Is it artistic integrity? And you know, there's sort of this discussion on what is real kind of extends to those other important ideas of the movie. Like the idea of fame and celebrity are really prevalent, and I think
Right.
their realness or lack thereof is kind of presented in contrast to love, whose realness we could also question, I suppose. But I think it's sort of, you know, the thesis of the movie is that it is a little more authentic, a little more real. You know, the yearning we see in some of the characters to be loved by people they know, or to be admired for their work by people they don't. It's a really strong motivator and an interesting kind of juxtaposition of ideas in the movie.
Yeah, that is ever present in the film, pulling from all directions from all the characters, you know, but all have differing motivations. I think this is obvious, and it's most obvious, obviously, with Regan and his misunderstanding of popularity and fame with love, you know, equating it to love. And but the weird thing is, like, he has love, and he's always had love, but his understanding of what love is from the external world with respect to fame and celebrity is so jaded, and which really he's never in control of, you know. And we see that struggle of understanding love with his daughter, and we even see the love with his ex-wife Sylvia, and again, it's not until the end that he can kind of fully embrace it. Yeah, he's a confusing character. But yeah, again, he's not the only character that kind of struggles with this. All the characters, like even all the actors in their performances and on stage, go through this as well.
Yeah, like the Naomi Watts character, you know, it says at one point, you know, I'm not an actress, I'm a little kid. And you know,
Right.
I need someone to tell me I've made it. You know, like imposter syndrome is something I think that we all deal with. So this experience for the characters felt really real to me, and her need for validation was so powerful in that scene. You know, you got the sense that nothing she accomplished would be enough without the acclaim of other people, and it's heartbreaking and totally relatable.
Yeah, man. I think everyone who tries to create something, you know, special, or I mean, that we all suffer from imposter syndrome, you know, to some degree. You can feel powerful and you know, certain in your convictions, but a lot of the times for creatives, man, you just can't help but feel inadequate, or you just compare yourself to others, and it's just almost ingrained in us, and it's such a hard thing that everybody sort of deals with. You know, I'll say you almost wish that you were ignorant to it, but it's, you know, that sort of relates to the title of it. Like what's the, you know, the title is Birdman, the unexpected virtue of ignorance. Like what, you know, what to you, what is that title even saying? Like,
Yeah, I mean that's an important question. You know, is it quite literally the ability to ignore what people say of you? That's kind of what I take from it. You know, like
right,
Reagan
exactly.
has that card in the corner of his mirror that says, "A thing is a thing, not what is said of the thing." And like I would love to believe that, you know, that we define ourselves through actions and not the review of or the opinion of others. And that's really important to a lot of these characters. Like, you know, talking about like that external validation, that need for fame and acclaim more than the need for something, you know, like love. And again, like that's always sort of these opposing ideas throughout the movie.
It's what Regan's striving for the whole film, and without knowing it, what he's actually doing. You know, on the surface, he's attempting to reclaim his career. How many times in the film does he talk about this as being his last chance, and he's
Mm.
he's put everything into this production and it's going to save his career and turn his life around. But I don't know if Regan thinks too much about it like that. Like I think he's trying to find or discover something in himself that he's scared, as he's never thought might be there, as an actor. He's blind to what he could actually truly become because he's had celebrity and fame, and he keeps sort of masking it throughout the film. And it's only through that ignorance that he achieves this unexpected virtue that exceeds his expectations, and I feel he knows on the surface the play would fail. Like, that's why he's like so worried and so stressed about it. He's concerned that he's looked at as a joke. But when he accepts who he really is, and he ends up doing something unthinkable in the performance, blowing his nose off, it just leads to this ideal, I guess, this virtuous act that I don't think he ever truly expected he could get to. And now whether that's the idea or that's like the ideal action that he's taking, I think that's another debate. But, I think he gets there in the film.
Yeah, I mean, you could also interpret it as I think, because it comes from the review that the critic gives. Her article is titled "The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance," and so you could interpret it that way, like that serendipitous success can happen by accidentally shooting off your nose. You can start a new wave of theater, which is friggin' hilarious. I think I like the first one better.
Sure.
And I think it's more important to the central themes of the film, because it is, we do all get swept up in this need for other people's approval, for fame, for popularity, versus something much more valuable, which is love, which is to be beloved. There is that opening text of the film, to be beloved on this earth. And I think I prefer the idea that if we can just ignore that external validation and focus on more of sort of, I guess, accepting ourselves and the love of the people close to us, that is a far greater virtue.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we've kind of dissected the film a bunch. I mean, we could talk about this movie a lot more. We didn't even really get into a lot of the technical aspects of it, but it's pretty incredible. And I'm curious though, this was your first time watching this. I've only seen this kind of a few times. And did this kind of hold up to your expectations? And is it a hell of a picture for you?
Yeah, I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. The drum soundtrack and the camera work kind of stressed me out at the beginning, which I think is sort of by design, because it's meant to be stressful. They're trying to impress upon you that aspect of production. But I settled into it, and I really liked this movie. Keaton should have won Best Actor. I don't care what Eddie Redmayne did as Stephen Hawking. The whole cast is so strong. The writing is splendid. The dialogue, though it's unending, it's just like people are just constantly talking in this. It never really gets stale. And it does what great writing should do, which is to confront ideas by showing rather than just telling. Like the actions of people in this movie and the events of the narrative tell us something that just, in such a way that is more effective and more meaningful, I think, than if you just come right out and say it. Like, everything here has purpose in what occurs, and I really love that. And there's a lot to extract from this movie, both in the moment and when you're thinking about it later. Mm-hmm. This feels like an irregular Best Picture winner. I know we've said that a couple of times, but in this series, but I think that's because we're picking fun movies and not because the Academy gets it right, a lot. I think they definitely got it right in 2015. But I will add, this is the same year that Grand Budapest Hotel came out. And I would have been equally pleased if that won Best Picture. I think it's Wes Anderson's best movie, but that's a conversation for another episode. For today, I will just say Birdman deserving Best Picture and deserving hell of a picture. Yes.
Wes Anderson, man, we should dive into some of his movies. he
For
has
sure.
such an aesthetic, and they sort of blend into. I fought against Wes Anderson for such a long time, and now I appreciate him so much. Anyway, that's again a discussion for another day. For myself, Birdman, like I remember when this first came out, I just absolutely loved it, and then I just sort of never revisited it. I was just sort of like, oh, I sort of get it, and it sort of fell at the way. So I think I was always of the mindset I'll get to it eventually, and I'm glad we did it for this because it is such an achievement. And like you said, the writing, the direction, the camera work. I mean, Emma Stone has said, she didn't get into too many details about it, but I guess during the promotion of the film, they were sort of asking her about the one take stuff, and she said she didn't want to reveal Alejandro's process, but like they were long takes. There were some camera tricks obviously in there, the standard going in front of a closing door curtain or those sort of things, but if you're sort of just thinking about how they're moving and the use of mirrors and just everything had to be so staged, and like you can imagine that you're doing a take and you're like 8-9 minutes into a take and then somebody fucks up a line or something, how brutal that must be. So the process, but like you said, that process just works in this film, and it plays to such great writing and the heavy dialogue and the performances. Like you said, like Eddie Redmayne, I'm like, okay, like he was Stephen Hawking. Like, is anybody talking about that performance? Like, I feel like Keaton's performance in this is so incredible, and it stands test of time, and he's wonderful in it. And so is Ed Norton. I think all the bit parts are so great. I love this
really
film. It's deserving of Best Picture, and it's deserving of a hell of a picture. And I can't even wait to rewatch it again. It's amazing. So there you go, another hell of a picture. Another episode where we both decide that yes, it is a hell of a picture.
Well deserved.
Yeah, awesome. Well deserved. So so we've completed this run of best pictures. We started in the 50s,
the 40s.
I remember now.
40s with Casablanca.
40s. Casablanca, and we got all the way up to the 2010s. And the Oscars are around the corner, so be sure to watch it. I haven't even seen hardly any of the Best Picture nominations this year.
Nor I. No, we're really bad cinephiles.
I always tried it.
Really bad cinephiles.
It's hard, man. It's hard to keep up, especially when they've like upped it to like 10 nominations. It's it's a lot, but I'm going to try to plow through a bunch of them before the award season, so I can get a sense of what I think will win Best Picture. But for next episode, we are going to take a cue from our last episode. And do you want to let everybody know sort of this run of films that we're going to dive into next?
Yeah, well, like you say, our last episode, No Country for Old Men, by the Coen brothers. We discussed it in that episode that we haven't, that was our first Coen picture, and we would really like to do more to try to get a handle on what the magnum opus of that directing duo is. So to do so, we're going to start next week by taking it back to the start with, now correct me on this, is this their first film?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and that is their neo-noir Blood Simple, correct?
Correct, yeah. And you've never seen Blood Simple?
Never. In fact, I'm only aware of it now because you've brought it up a couple times. But very interested to check that out. And maybe it's a Deakins. Is it a Deakins? He's involved in 2/3 of their films, so maybe it's a Deakins affair.
I don't know.
We'll find out. We'll get the lab boys to work on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a Deakins, but it's a pretty amazing. Yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld. I don't know who that is. But yeah, this was their first film, and it was from 1984, independent film, in their wheelhouse, obviously, as a crime and neo-noir. And man, it's been a few years since I've seen this, but this is we're gonna enjoy talking about this, I think.
Very cool.
So So very stoked with this. And then we're going to do sort of this run of like Coen Brothers. I don't know. We don't know exactly where we're going to head next, but we're going to do sort of a handful of them and get a sense of some Coen Brothers, because there's a bunch I haven't seen. There's a bunch Dave hasn't seen. So we're going to cross them off of our list. So that's for next episode. So catch up on Blood Simple.
Mm-hmm.
So for David Hollinshurst, my name is Andrew Bartlett, and we're finished with this run of Oscar pictures, and we'll see you guys all next time for our run of Coen Brothers. So yeah, see you next time on Hell of a Picture.